Hey, so Matt, Pope Francis died this week.
He did.
I don't know how to segue from anything into that. That's going to be... Let me take a deep breath. So,
Dude,
Matt...
like he died right after his Easter homily.
So he died Monday morning,
Yeah.
the day after Easter. And he spoke and gave a little blessing.
Yeah.
So what do you think, or what did you think of Pope Francis? What was your take on Pope Francis?
I loved him. Yeah, I thought, like, at the very beginning when he chose not to sleep in the palace, but sleep in the, outside of that, he wouldn't wear red shoes.
Like the Cardinals' dorm room when they come to visit.
He wanted to sleep.
He had a regular room.
Yeah. I thought all that, was really interesting. The way that he wore that title was very different than I had seen, like Ratzinger or Pope John Paul, or, I thought very interesting. So I felt like and that he was from Latin America.
Yeah.
He'd been shaped in a different language.
He was the first pope in 2,000 years from the Western Hemisphere.
Yeah.
Is that right?
But yeah, I guess. Yeah, since Jesus, since Peter.
Oh yeah, Jesus was from America. I can't believe he went there. Did that. Yeah, so he was. Here's what's interesting. So we'll talk about a lot of stuff that I think is very fascinating that leads to his life. Catholics have mixed reviews on him.
Yes.
And then people generally had mixed reviews on him. I think overwhelmingly he was loved and cherished, but he was different. And one of the terms they use in the church, which means a lot of different things to a lot of different people, is you had the more traditional wing and the more progressive wing. Every church has these.
But usually you know what that means, progressive and traditional.
Well, progressive is, and here's the thing that's interesting to me about Francis, is he was referred to as, he was called progressive pope because not so much, he didn't change the rules of the church. Like, they're not ordaining women.
No.
They're not marrying same-sex couples. They're not still condoning divorce. He's still anti-abortion, pro-life. That's what I'm saying. Is like none of those things changed. But his tone was different.
He emphasized mercy over judgment.
Right.
And that became what then he gets labeled as a progressive.
Correct.
He did not want to change any of the, like
he didn't change any of them. He didn't change any of the doctrine of the church. But very early after I think it was 2013 when he was elected. Was it 2013 or 2015? It was 2013. And he was on a flight and he got asked a question about LGBTQ people. And I can't remember if it was gay clergy or gay folks in the church or whatever, but he made the comment that said, to sum it all down, he said, who am I to judge? Like, they're welcome, they can come. He wasn't saying that what they do is right. He wasn't condoning, same kind of like Jesus. He never condoned the sin. He just said, who am I to judge? Well, that really ticked off a lot of people.
You're the Pope.
I'm like, your job is judging people. That is your job.
For 2,000 years, the Catholic Church has felt judged.
How are all the good Catholics going to feel a healthy dose of guilt in their life if they don't have someone to judge them, right? But he started down this road. I think when he first was elected, I don't know if you remember this. So all right, so let's go back in time. His family, they were Italian immigrants to Argentina. So when you think about how his position and stance and the things that he talked about, like even in recent news, migration and immigration, he was very much on be merciful to the migrant, be merciful to the immigrant, be kind, love them, be with them, serve them, just be like Christ to them. And there were some people that thought he was being too political. Right? Because
you're quoting too much from the Beatitudes. Yes, right. Would you quit doing that?
Yeah. And they thought he was being too political, and they didn't like that. And particularly, certain folks in the United States didn't like it. They just thought he was being political. He wasn't. I don't get the sense he was being political. He was speaking to real issues, which the church lives in the context of the world.
Yes.
And so, but what he was saying was just mercy, love, kindness, salvation. These were the things he was saying. But it struck me because his family, he comes from a family of immigrants.
Yeah.
He was the oldest of 5 children and wanted to be a chemist or wanted to be a professor or whatever, and ended up being called into the ministry and was ordained a priest, but then also into the Jesuit order when he was 30 years old, which, they're big on education, but they're also big on opening the door. They're the very evangelistic.
Father Gregory Boyle is a Jesuit.
Yes.
So that's
and we have a great school here, a great Jesuit high school. Not only are they educators, but they're great evangelists for the Catholic Church and for the gospel. They really believe in going out into the places. If you want to watch a great movie with Robert De Niro called The Mission.
Midnight Run? Oh, The Mission.
Midnight Run.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Taxi Driver was great.
That was great.
No, called The Mission.
The Mission is phenomenal.
It is one of the best movies. If you are a Christian and you've never seen The Mission, you have to go watch
Go
The
to
Mission.
Blockbuster right now and get that movie.
But what was interesting is the priests who went out into the jungles to evangelize the natives in South America, they were Jesuits.
Yes.
And I won't give the story away, but early on, he commits this very grave mortal sin, and he tries to find penance, and so he joins their order and goes with him into the. It's just an amazing.
There's a scene in that I can never not cry.
When they cut he carries his armor all the way up the mountain. Yeah, you have to watch the movie.
And the person that he kills
soundtrack.
family.
The soundtrack will be. A soundtrack, and I don't remember
Gabriel's Oboe.
Gabriel's Oboe is like one of the famous songs, but it's Ennio Morricone he did the soundtrack. Who did all these? He's one of the greatest movie composers there is. I'm just saying it's wonderful. You will just play the soundtrack, if nothing else. Just play the soundtrack.
Your point is Jesuits.
My point is Jesuits. They have that. So So think about his life as an immigrant. Think about he. Is a Jesuit.
Yeah.
So he believes in going out into the streets where the people are, where the church is not in a building, just like the Jesuits have forever. He serves the poor. He goes to the neediest, the most marginalized, the most broken, the most unhealthy. Who does that sound like?
Sounds like you.
That's so nice. When's Jarbo coming back to guest us? Next week? Can we get him next week?
Do you feel open and loved?
No, you're
and connected with
and emotionally more intelligent.
Yeah, I can see that.
Full circle.
That's good. I like that.
Touche.
So so all of his experiences lead up to put him in. It was he also is very politically savvy because he comes from a country where you have to pay attention to the politics of South and Central America tend to be pretty cutthroat, and he lived a simple life. So there's this famous picture of him in the bishop, or maybe when he became Cardinal of Buenos Aires, and he would ride the public transportation, the bus, to work and back.
Yeah.
And there's this great picture of him early in that period where he's on a public bus with all the other people. And he's just looking into the camera with this face, and it's just one of the iconic pictures of him.
Yeah.
They thought that he was going to be elected in 2011, I think, or when was it that Ratzinger was in? Yeah, they thought he was going to get elected
right after that.
Maybe it was 2005. It was 2005, and Pope Benedict is elected. There are a lot of people that thought he was going to be elected because he just had. Well, then when Pope Benedict stepped down, resigned, retired, whatever, they thought, okay, he's still the guy, but now he's too old. But he was elected. And when he was elected, he took the name, for people who don't know, popes get to choose their name. So John Paul is not his name. Ratzenberger was Pope Benedict. And Cardinal Bergoglio, becomes the very first Pope Francis. No one had ever taken that name before.
Yeah. Francis of Assisi. Yeah, the monk, the one that stood with the poor. This is, the prayer of St. Francis, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is like deeply moving, and
stood for the poor, kind of stood up to the kings, and even stood up to the church for all of their investment in all the gold and the fancy, all the fancy. And he's like, why won't we? I'm sure a lot of Christians have said that through generations, but Francis was not afraid to stand up and speak truth to power for the poor. Yeah. So here he is. And he did not change his way of being.
No, he didn't.
As the Pope. I mean, there's all these stories like, okay, he didn't choose to live in the papal residence, the palace. He did not choose for his fisherman's ring. Every pope has a fisherman's ring. It's kind of like old days when they used to seal so no one could forge your identity. You don't really need those anymore. But they're always made uniquely for the pope out of solid gold. He chose a recycled ring, a silver ring, just to be gold plated. I mean, little things like that. His cross that he wore, he didn't want it to be gold. He wanted it to be iron. He wore an iron cross when he stood out and greeted everyone, not the gold cross. And he, as he went out into people, was not afraid to. There's all these beautiful videos of him kissing,
washing feet, as y'all were talking about last week.
And I'm looking at these children in these places where there's got to. It's just not sanitary. And he's kissing their feet. He's washing their feet. He's kissing them on the lips. And I'm like, holy moly.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting to me. His first visit outside of Rome, he went to a refugee camp. His first visit. He didn't visit kind of heads of state. He didn't have a heads of state dinner. He went to a refugee camp. And there was pictures out of that refugee camp of him washing feet of refugees coming out, I think, Syria or Turkey, which was just absolutely moving, right? And it wasn't a photo op. You get the sense that this man, because of like his Jesuit upbringing who started the Jesuits was Ignatius, right? And Ignatius was a real prophet to the church that really asked the church to listen more than it did speak. That's where the Ignatius spirituality comes out of. Our own center is steeped deeply in that. And so you have a man that has been listening more than talking, has been, I think, aligning himself with the margins more than at the center, who's now at the center, and he's inviting the margins in. I just thought,
yeah. And so when he was elected and became Pope, at the beginning, I think if you remember, he was widely, like, everyone was excited.
Yeah.
Everyone was excited. And the people loved him. And then what happened, there was the controversy that sort of came, was because the way he would say things, by becoming more tolerant and welcoming of LGBTQ people, or again, not changing the doctrine of the church. They're not doing weddings. They're not. He was not even condoning of the lifestyle, but he was just saying these are children. Who am I to judge? They should be welcome. He talked about immigrants and migration, and so what happened was the tone. They didn't like the tone.
Yes,
and it was particularly a lot of the Catholic Church in the United States more than anywhere else.
Yeah.
And what happened early in his papacy was that there started one of the things they do is they will send what they call these dubias, and the dubias are these. It's literally called doubts. They're questions, and so if you want to bog the system down, you just send in these dubias. Say, you did this, and how does this go contrary to our blah, 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 blah. I don't think this is the right, so you can send these things in. And historically, every pope would respond to these, and it would take lots of time. They'd have to write some sort of a response.
Thank God for ChatGPT nowadays, huh? Popes are ripping those things out like
and so
candy.
There was a group a group of more conservative bishops and cardinals, and they just started bombarding him with these dubious to basically make him take all of his time to have to be on the defensive to answer all these questions of why did you say this and why did you do this and we don't think this is right, and you shouldn't say this, you shouldn't delve into this is political, whatever. He never answered one of them.
Sounds like a Jesus and Pilate move to me.
He refused to answer them. And one of the reporters that was that covered him for most of his life, he said, I asked Pope Francis about the unanswered dubia questions and whether he worried that if his opponents in the American church might break off from Rome, because there was talk that the American church, which is more conservative than most of the rest of Roman Catholicism around the world, and Africa, but in different ways. But in the United States church, it got really tied up, and this is what Francis said, it got really tied up in politics and ideology. Africa's not tied up in politics and ideology. Around human sexuality, they're very clear. But in the United States, it was very political and ideological. And so what he said was, he goes, are you afraid that the American church might break off? And he said, I pray there are no schisms, but I am not scared. And the reason that he did not respond to them is actually a great politically savvy move. He said, I don't want to give them any more oxygen than they deserve. He goes, these questions, what they're trying to do is not rooted in theology or in scripture or in Bible or in the teachings. He said it's rooted in ideology and politics.
That's a real wisdom move, right? It feels like that has to come out of a deep spiritual well to know how to move in that way, right? Mm-hmm. One of the things I liked about him, and I can, obviously this is just looking from the outsider in, but he seemed deeply pastoral and tender. It seemed like that his papacy was a return to tenderness. In a way that Pope John wasn't, Ratzinger wasn't, Benedict, that there was a more judicial, harsher tone, maybe with Pope John back when we were kids, right? Because that was right during the fall of the Eastern Wall and the solidarity. You had a Polish Pope that was, but even then there was a real stringent kind of side. I felt like Francis really opened up a tenderness that I had not seen in what it meant to be a pope.
The other thing he did that is unique is he was not afraid to show his humanity and his vulnerability. I mean, when he made mistakes, he would admit it, and that's not kind of what popes are supposed to do, right? The story of like when he there was a period of time there during the sexual abuse victims had come forward and the church was fighting all this, and he chose to believe the bishops over the victims. And several years later, he admitted that he was wrong. Yeah. That he had made an error in his ways, and he promised that he would not do that again. Yeah. I mean, just to be able to say that, I mean, the liability alone, like an organization. When is the last time
anybody in a position of that kind of power has said, I got it totally wrong. It's such a crucial place. Yeah. I mean, it just doesn't happen.
I don't know. I think there's a lot about him that I don't know. I struggle nowadays with how people. I've even heard Catholics and I've heard Protestant Christians just like go after him. Like I don't like him. I heard one Catholic guy like, he's not my pope. Kind of like he's not my president kind of thing.
He's not my Jesus.
I was like, yeah, it doesn't work that way. Yeah. Sorry. For 2,000 years, there's a way it works. And you don't get to say he's not your pope. He is your pope. You can say you don't like him, but I don't.
Do you think it uncovered a deep divide within the Catholic tradition in that how does there's many, as I mean, this is me throwing rocks at a house I don't have to live in, but there's some issues around kind of both how that governs itself, the lack of priests, how it's and so his I think it uncovered the ways that he just moved wasn't. I think it uncovered divides rather than created them.
he was a unique voice in the sense that now you're seeing fewer and fewer of those voices.
Yeah.
He was actually one who would speak out against nationalism and populism because he
and capitalism.
Yes. Well, I may have a difference of opinion with him on that too, but
I don't. But
I know you don't. But that's why you sit in that
Marxist,
seat, the left seat, and I sit in the right seat.
I still laugh when you introduce me to the church. You'll always notice Matt is on my left.
Yes. That's why we sit the way we do. So if you're watching on YouTube, Matt's always on the left side.
Always on the left.
He's always on the left side.
That's right.
One time I told Jeff, I was like, "Do you think is my right side better? Should I sit over there?" I was like, "No, that would mess it all up. That would mess the whole thing up." No, I think like just the day he dies. So this gives you an intersection of him not. I mean, he is literally on his deathbed for all intents and purposes. He dies the next day, and he's meeting with J.D. Vance, President of the United States. And he makes the plea to care for
the immigrant
and show mercy to the migrants and the immigrants.
Yeah. I mean,
and it just, I'm like, it doesn't matter what your politics are. You can love J.D. Vance and you can love but I mean, you can't be a Christian and joyfully and gleefully celebrate people's suffering and hardship and pain.
No.
You just can't.
You can't.
And that's what we've talked about a lot here. And I think that's what you saw in him, is someone who he's like, look, I'm not being political. I'm not saying you can't. I'm not talking about you not having secure borders. I'm talking about how you treat the immigrant, the foreigner in your land, and are you doing it with mercy and compassion and love and care? That's what he was. That's what he was doing. And I think again, his argument was that the reason people got so livid with him, so he's getting too political. He's too political. He's too political. And then all the people would attack him. And what he was saying was like, I'm not being political. You're being political.
Right. Your resistance to that is political.
It is political and ideological.
But to be able to say the same thing that is the reason why Israel was often led out of Israel and into captivity because they no longer cared for the widow, orphan, stranger.
What he said this not specifically this way, but he would stand up and speak out against world leaders who demonized migrants or immigrants for their own political gain.
Yeah.
And that strikes me as something worthwhile. Again, you can't be a Christian and demonize or objectify or dehumanize other children of God. And yet people do it all the time.
Yeah.
Especially people do it for their own political gain. So I just think he was, I mean, we talk here about following the life, the teachings, the words, the ministry, the actions of Jesus. And I think, man, if there was ever a pope that seemed to I'm not saying he was perfect. The church would say he's perfect. I mean, there's some infallibility of the pope. It doesn't mean he's perfect. They still don't believe he's a perfect person. But I don't know. I think, man, he in recent memory comes closer to trying to align his life with the life of Jesus.
Yeah.
In the way that he just put off the trappings. I mean, he did what he needed to do. It's a political job as much as a religious job, but I don't know. I think he was good.
Yeah.
And it'll be interesting to see who they choose to as the new pope. Because will it be someone who will continue in that vein, right? Or will it be someone who steps back into a previous generation? So the last thing for this episode, and I want to be very careful here because this is the no spoiler zone, right? No spoilers.
Okay.
Have you seen the movie Conclave? You've seen it?
Is that spoiling it by saying?
No, you can say you saw it. Have you seen it?
Oh yeah, I've seen it.
Because when you nod your head on a podcast, I'm not sure
I
if
didn't
you know
if it was
how.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you know how podcasts, if they're not watching on YouTube and they're listening, if Fuqua is walking his dog and he's listening, he's not going to know what your response is.
That was a nod, Matt.
That was a nod. So, nod, yes. Conclave. So you've seen it.
I have. Have you?
Jeff, have you seen it? Yeah, we watched it last night.
I've not seen it.
I watched it in honor of all this. So
I wonder if that's gonna pop.
without giving away the critical twist
The
here.
theological
There is a
twist.
twist. I will say there is a twist.
Well, there's just a theological conundrum.
Yeah, but I will say, what did you think? It strikes me as kind of like, if you like Death on the Nile, Murder on the Orient Express, it has that kind of vibe of like mystery, subterfuge.
Yeah.
It's all the politics of the different people.
I loved it.
And
I
you've
thought it was
got
great.
these great actors
these
in there.
actors
You got
in it are
Ralph
just-
Fiennes, John Lithgow,
Yeah.
and Stanley
Stanley
Tucci,
Tucci.
who I want Stanley Tucci to be my bishop. Is there any way that,
he can just go.
that you can clip this right here, right, and tag Stanley Tucci
Yep.
and tell him I watch all of his shows, all right, on going to Italy.
He was great.
I've got his cookbook for
Yeah.
Christmas. My wife gave because I love Stan.
He could just act
He can
as
just
the Pope.
act like he wants to be my
The Pope.
bishop. I'll be glad for him to be the bishop.
Would you become Catholic if Stanley Tucci was the Pope?
Yes, I would.
You would?
I'm Stanley Tucci. I can't even do Stanley Tucci. I'm Stanley Tucci,
He's
and
great.
I'm your bishop.
He was
Can't
great.
do Stanley Tucci. Well, man, he's
Jeff,
good.
you got to watch Conclave.
Yeah, I just.
All right, so
Very,
see if
very
you can
interesting.
hashtag up Stanley Tucci.
Yep,
Just
I'll
let him
tag
know
him.
we got mad props.
Yep.
But yeah, each of the characters.
I think Ralph Fiennes would have been a great Pope. And that's, I mean, there was some good
Yeah,
acting. in
we
that.
can't go too far because I really don't want to spoil it.
Okay.
You could if we what podcasts do this. All right, starting right now.
Spoiler alert.
We're gonna spoil it.
Yeah.
So if you
Turn
don't
it
want
off.
to hear
I'm
it,
serious.
you can
Listen,
turn.
if you're even thinking about watching this film, turn this thing off right now. Because
Yeah, I don't want to do that.
no, let's not
No.
do that. No,
Because
it's just-
I think
let's wait. Let's wait.
I think I would
It's worth
rather
it. It's worth it.
push you to watch it.
You know what? After I saw this film, I wanted to get a group of people together and just talk about it, process it, because on so many different levels, there was all this theological questions about, and then you see all the what you already recognize is that the church at its heart is a deeply political machine, but also there's this other question about the heart of the church, who embodies that, who gets to say what that is.
Yes.
And I think one of the things that Francis did such a great job of is that he was a paradox. He held sides together, and in his own pastoral being, the love of God shaped that's why he could, in some ways, peeve the conservatives.
It's really timely too because the bishop
And the progressives.
the pope that died,
Yes.
he was in
Yes.
he was in the cardinal's apartment.
Oh,
Did
he
you
was-
notice that he
yes.
was in the same? He wasn't in the palace.
right.
So it was almost like they were fashioning him. He lived very simply, like they were fashioning him off of Francis. You got the sense, and there was all this intrigue of the progressive wing versus the traditional wing, which we've talked
And
about
bringing
already.
a couple people from far into the close and all
Right,
that
yeah,
kind of
yeah.
stuff. In the end, it was just, yeah.
So here's another one. If you're into the papal history, have you seen
Have you seen The Big Lebowski?
No.
Is it? No. That's
Have you ever watched a series called The Borgias?
no.
All right, you need to watch The Borgias.
La Borgias?
No,
Oh.
The Borgias, BORG. It's great. Jeremy Irons. Do you like
Oh.
Jeremy Irons?
Yeah, he was in The Mission.
All right. So Jeremy Irons is Pope Alexander VI,
Wow.
and
This looks like a soap opera.
it is. It starts out with the election. He's the cardinal, and it is the politics, and it's the intrigue, and it's happening right around the time of the Protestant Reformation.
It looks like there's probably more sex happening here than than the Catholic
kinda
Church wants to admit.
It's kind of like the Game of Thrones of papal
of Jesus.
yeah, kind of thing. But he has a family.
Okay.
Like he
Oh.
lives in a house with his family. Like
Oh.
they're not supposed to be married and have kids. And apparently, like this is the thing. They're all corrupt. They all pay each other. It's all this
Is this true?
intrigue. Yes, the
True
Borgia.
story?
Oh yeah, he was a real pope. In
Huh.
yeah, he was the real pope.
Had a family? There's always
yes,
loopholes.
that's-
You know, and
yes.
every time that there's a, I am Chase.
Rodrigo
there's like
de
a
Borgia.
loophole.
Hey,
Except on
2011.
Wednesdays.
He was the pope from. He lived until 1503,
And
but
Mardi Gras.
basically he was leading up.
And
He
in
was
Vegas.
the pope that was leading right up to the Protestant Reformation, and so there's all this drama and stuff coming out. It's really good.
So there was reason for some reform. Okay. I get it. Jeremy Irons is great.
He was also Pope during Christopher Columbus in 1492, the Second Italian War, all these sorts of things. So if you're looking, he was one of the most controversial of the Renaissance popes, partly because he acknowledged fathering several children by his mistresses.
Holla.
As a result, his Italianized Valencian surname Borgia became a byword for libertinism and nepotism. I think he wanted to make his son like a cardinal or something and Pope too. Yeah, so that's really good. If you like Jeremy Irons, who doesn't like Jeremy Irons? Yeah. Make sure you subscribe and like and share, because we just want people to enjoy this ride with us. And I am looking forward to hearing what you and Jarbo
it's going to be
can
life-changing.
Mix up next week.
It's going to be life-changing.
Yeah.
We're going to talk a lot about you, I have a feeling.
I think he's going to get in trouble.
Who, Jarbo?
Yeah.
Why?
He's working over here more than he is working at Memorial Drive.
Is he at Memorial Drive?
Not anymore.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know when that starts, but yeah. Well, this has been fun. Anything else?
That's great.
All right. Well, I'm John Stevens.
I'm Matt Russell.
And this is Pod Have Mercy.